Begin today the Gemara Daf Yutes Amud Beis at the Mishnah towards the bottom of the Amud. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, ve'ein oisin tachshitin la'avedis kechavim. You may not make any things that are of adornments, jewelry for Avoda Zara. Katlois, which is a kind of necklace, a choker, unizamim, nose rings, and tabois, not any other kind of rings. Rabbi Eliezer argues and says, "B'schar mutter." If you're getting paid for it, then it's allowed. They're paying you, so then there's no problem. Okay, so this is a big pella. There's a big pella that Rabbi Eliezer should say that if you're getting paid to make jewelry for Avoda Zara, you're allowed. Taisvis here says that it's impossible that there's any Tana that should hold that this would be allowed. This is a Taisvis before. The Ramasch of the Taisvis is Yigia Lechippah. And Taisvis says even more that it seems to him that Rashi as well disagrees with this. There's no such a thing. There's no, actually Taisvis says that this whole part of the Mishnah, from Ve'enois and Tachshitin until the end, after Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, is erased. It doesn't appear in Mishnayos. If you look in the Mishnah, the way it's brought in the Yerushalmi, this entire ket of the Mishnah is not here. It says, look at Rashi. There's no Rashi on this part of the Mishnah. Even the word katliyois, which is an unusual word, Rashi doesn't explain either because Rashi wasn't guided this whole Mishnah. It's impossible to say that there's a Tana that would say that for money you could make something for Avoda Zara. Okay, now the Bach makes a small change in the gears of the Mishnah. Instead of reading a Pischar Mutter, the Bach is guided here, Schorei Mutter, which means something else, which means that you're not allowed to make it. Rabbi Eliezer agrees, you're not allowed to make this jewelry for Avoda Zara, but b'diavad, if you did, the money that you earned from it would be allowed. Which is really a point that the Gemara said before this Mishnah, and before it quoted in the name of the Amayra, Rabbi Lazar, that said that if b'diavad, if you made something for Avoda Zara, if you remember, we learned yesterday that it's not done until the last bang, and therefore it's less than a shava pruta, and so therefore you could b'diavad have hana from it. So Taisa says that to learn Pshat in this Mishnah this way is also very difficult because the Gemara before brings it in the name of an Amayra, and here according to this Gersa you have a Beferish Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer Atana is saying it. So therefore Taisa says we're not guided this entire part of the Mishnah. Okay, and in the Gemara as well, by the way. In the Gemara there's no Pirish on this section of the Mishnah either. Okay, the next part of the Mishnah is Dr. Mishnah Ein Moichrin Lehem B'Mechuber Lekarka. You can't sell a guy anything, a property, or anything that's even just attached to the ground. The source of this halacha, as the Gemara will bring, is Be'ikir in Eretz Yisrael, that you're not allowed to give a goy a space, a piece of land in Eretz Yisrael. So even selling him a tree, which is attached to the land, you're also not allowed. Aval, it's when could you sell to a guy? If you're selling him a tree, after you cut the tree, then you can sell it to him. Rabbi Yehuda says there's a heter a step before. If you're selling a guy a tree on the condition that he's going to come to your property and cut the tree and take it, so even if now, when you're selling it to him, it's still attached to the ground, you're allowed to sell it to him. What is the source for this? You're not allowed to sell a guy a piece of ground, a piece of land that's in Eretz Yisrael. And actually, we'll see in the next Mishnah, there will be more details about this, exactly where we're talking about. But Minat Torah, the source of this is regarding Eretz Yisrael. The pasuk says, "Loi sachonim." What's the meaning of Loi sachonim? Loi siten lehem chanoye bekarka. Don't give a guy a place to rest in the land in Eretz Yisrael. That's the source. It's a lav. Frak the Gemara, Hai Loi sachonim. This pasuk Loi sachonim ibayale is actually needed and it has a different translation. The Torah is saying something else. Loi siten lehem chen. Don't give a guy chen, grace. Don't show favor, that the guy finds favor in your eyes. That's the taich of chen. Rashi says that you shouldn't say regarding a guy, oh, how beautiful is this guy. When you come to recognize and give favor or goodness to a guy, so then that brings a kiruv, that brings you to follow in his ways. That's what you learn from this pasuk. And says the Gemara, in kain le mikra loy suchunam. The right way to pronounce this would be as if it would be written with a vav, suchunem. Then it would mean don't give the goy chen. My loy sachanem. Why does it use the Torah? Doesn't say it with a vav. It says loy sachanem. Shmai not tarti. The fact that it doesn't say it with a vav, so you could learn out a second point, and that's loy sachanem, or maybe according to the way the Gemara is teaching, loy sitlem chanoy bekarka, you have to read it as loy sachanem, like a machne, like don't allow them to rest in the land. So you can learn a second point. Frag the Gemara, but vakatimi boyalei. There's still another point that we find that you learn from this pasuk. The Hachi Amar Achmana, the Torah is saying as follows: Leisiten lehem matnas shel chinam. Do not give them a gift. Don't give them something without pay. That's what the pasuk is saying. So the Gemara answers, Imkein le'mikra loisechinam. Then it should have been with a yud. It would have said loisechinam. Don't give them something for free. My loisechonim. When it says in the Torah the word loisechonim, shma mina kulu. I could learn out all points from this that it doesn't say loisechunam. So even though the pshat in the pasuk is really not to show any favor to a guy, but nevertheless it doesn't say the vav there. And also the pshat of the pasuk would be loisechinam. Don't give him a gift for free, but it doesn't say the yud there. But both of those pshatim are also ways how to read the pasuk. But then you also have loisachanim, not to give them a place to rest in the land. So you learn out all three from the pasuk. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned this in the Braisa. Lois Chane means Lois Sitalem Chanoya Bekarka. Do not give them a place to rest in the land in Eretz Yisrael. Davar Achar, a second shot, Lois Chane means Lois Sitalem Chen. Don't show a guy Chen, grace. Davar Achar, a third shot, Lois Chane means Lois Sitalem Matnas Chinam. Do not give a guy a Matnas Chinam, a gift. So Taisus here points out regarding this pasuk of Lois Chane, in the simple pshat of the pasuk, it's speaking only about the Shiva Umais in Eretz Yisrael, the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael, that it says there Loisachanim, then it says also Loisischatim Bam, different Isurim that apply only to the Shiva Umais. But here Taisus says that this Isur of Loisachanim that it's mentioning here is not only regarding the Shiva Umais, it's regarding any guy. And Taisus says the Lashon is a time Rabbah. Whatever reason there is not to allow a guy to be in Eretz Yisrael, or regarding a gift, or regarding Chayin, that same reason applies regarding any guy, and therefore we don't make a chiluk whether it's the Shiva Umais or it's any of the other nations. That's what Taisus here explains, is the first Taisus here on the Amid Barichis. Okay, but now the Gemara actually brings regarding the last point about giving a guy a gift, that it's a machlokes. Or matnas chinam gufe, regarding giving a guy a gift, tanoihi. It's a machlokes tanoihi. The Tanya, because it says in the Braisa, Loiseichlu kol nevela, that you shouldn't eat meat that wasn't shechted properly. What do you do with it? So the pasuk says, La ger asher b'sharecha tetaneno, give it to the ger that lives in your gates. That's not referring to a real ger, but it's referring to the ger Toshav, which Rashi says is a guy that accepted Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. He doesn't serve Avoda Zara. So give the nevela to this ger Toshav to eat. V'achola, and he will eat it. Oi machar l'nachri, or you can sell it to a guy. So now, what do you see from this pasuk? So the Tanakame here, which is Rab Meir, so he says, Ein liyelo. So if you read the simple pshat of the pasuk, what it would seem it's saying is leger benesina, that if you're giving this meat away to a ger Toshav, to him you give it for free. But if you're giving it to a guy, so b'mechira, to the guy you should sell it. Now leger b'mechira minayin. How do I know that you don't have to give it away to the ger Toshav for free? You could charge him for it as well. Talmud Loimar, so the pasuk says, and you can read the pasuk this way: Titnena oy machar loivekachavim. Right. So even though in the simple pshat of the pasuk it's saying that lageresh b'sharecha titnena kama, or va'achola, that is titnena va'achola kama, and then oy machar lenachri, that you sell it to the guy, but you can read it together. Lageresh b'sharecha titnena, that you give it to the ger Toshav, oy machar, or you sell it to him. So therefore, we learn out from here that you can give it or even sell it to the guy. So now, a similar Rav Meir darshans over here regarding a guy as well. That the pasuk simply is saying that for a guy you should sell it to a guy. Now, so for a guy that you can give it to him as well, minayin. How do I know that you don't have to sell it to the guy, but you could give it to the guy as a gift as well? Talmud Loimar. So you could also read the pasuk Titanena va'achala oy machar lenachri. You read the words Titanena va'achala referring to the guy that you can either give it to him or sell it to him. So nimtzat ha'omer. Therefore, we learn from this pasuk echad ger ve'echad ga'ovikachavim, whether it's a ger Toshav or it's a guy. Bein b'nesina, bein b'mechira. You can give it to him, or you could sell it to him. Okay, now Rashi explains here, why are we reading the pasuk this way? Why don't we leave the pasuk on its simple pshat? So Rashi says, what Rav Meir, this is different Rav Meir, this is Rav Meir Shitta. What Rav Meir is saying is, if the pasuk meant to say very simply and clearly that for the ger Toshav you're only allowed to give it to him as a gift, and you can't charge him. you must support him, give it to him as a gift. And for the guy, you must charge him, you must sell it to him. Then the lashon of the pasuk would have been differently. It would have said first titnena. It would have said titnena va'achala lager asher b'sharecha, oy macher lenachri. So it wouldn't say the two words of titnena va'achala and macher together. It would put the word ger asher b'sharecha in between. It should be clear that they're separate. The fact that the Torah puts the words titnena va'achala oy macher together shows that you can read these 2 points together, whether on the ger teishav or on the guy, and therefore you can sell it or give it as a gift both to the ger teishav or to the guy. Rabbi Yehuda, however, Rabbi Yehuda argues, and Rabbi Yehuda says, Dvarim kichsavam. No, you read the pasuk in its simple pshat. Leger b'nesina, only to a ger teishav, which is fulfilling Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach, to him you give it as a gift. But by a guy, you have to sell it to him. You're not allowed to give it to him as a gift. So here, this is a brayso where you see there's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda regarding the nevela. Are you allowed to give it to the guy as a gift, or you have to sell it to him? Okay, now the Gemara explains the basis of their machlokes in the pshat of the pasuk. Says the Gemara, Shapik Rabbi Meir. What Rabbi Meir is saying seems to be right. Then the language of the pasuk, it puts together Tetnena va'achala and oy macher, which indicates that you can read them together both regarding the ger teishav and regarding the guy. So Rabbi Meir's Rasha seems to be right. So for Rabbi Yehuda Malach, Rabbi Yehuda will answer you, if what Rabbi Meir said is true, that you should read it together. So then, Lichtov Rachmane, Titnena ve'achala umacher. It should say umacher, meaning that it goes together, that you could sell it or give it as a gift for the guy or for the ger teishav. Oy lamali. Why does it say the word oy there? When it says oy means or, oy comes to divide. Shma mina l'dvarim kichsav mudasa. So the word oy teaches me that you have to read the pasuk in its simple pshat, that it's for the ger teishav that you give it as a gift, and then oy machal lenachri, oy is dividing that for the guy you don't give it as a gift, and the guy you sell it to him. That's what Rabbi Yehuda learns from the word oy. The Gemara explains that Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir will explain to you why does it say the word oy if you do read it together both on the guy and on the ger teishav. Hahu la'agdumi nisine the guy the ger lemechira davik. It's writing the word oy to say that if you have an option to either give it as a gift to the ger teishav or to give to a guy, so then you should first give it to a ger teishav. Give it to him first as a gift, and only then, if you can't give it to a ger teishav as a gift, then you sell it to a guy. That's why it's writing the word oy to tell you what's the better option, what's the first thing you should do. Rashi here brings the pasuk that it says regarding a ger teishav. By a ger teishav, the pasuk says that v'chai imach. There's a mitzvah to be mechaya a ger teishav, and therefore, if you have an option to give it as a gift to a ger teishav, you should give it to him first. But Rabbi Yehuda, what Rabbi Yehuda says, this point that you have to support a ger teishav if you're able, and that's the first option. Kivin the ger at the mitzvah lahach yaisai. Since by a ger there's a mitzvah to be mechayim, as I just mentioned, it says v'chai imach el kanani I at the mitzvah lahach yaisai, and by a guy you don't have a mitzvah to be mechayim, so then lahaktim leitzarich kra. The word oy to say that you should first support a ger teishav if you have that option, you don't need the oy for that purpose, because that's learned out from the pasuk v'chai imach. So then why does it say oy? Oy is saying to divide, that you could only give it as a gift to a ger teishav, but you don't give it as a gift to a guy. By a guy, you have to sell it to him. That's the taich of this machlokes. That's the machlokes of Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, whether you're allowed to give a gift to a guy. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the pasuk of Lo Sachanim. Davarach, the Gemara before brought another pshat. Lo Sachanim means Lo Sitein Lahem Chen. Don't show Chen, grace to a guy that you're looking at a guy and finding him to be beautiful and so on. So the Gemara here brings a whole hamshach on this inyan.
Top says that
Yeah?
it's front of Avoda Zara.
Kama oivid kechavim zeh noah. It doesn't refer to Avoda Zara, it refers to the guy. When it says oivid kechavim, it doesn't refer to Avoda Zara.
Avoda Zara zeh noah.
What do you have over there? You have Avoda Zara? Huh? Oivid kechavim, it says. Oivid kechavim. It's not Avoda Zara, it's the guy. Refers to a guy. Here, the Gemara is going to bring here now, we'll see. Zok the Gemara Messiah Rav. What said in the Braise is a proof to the point that Rav said. Rav said, Osir la'adam sheyaymar kama noah oivedes kechavim zu. A person is not allowed, if he sees a beautiful woman, a geish beautiful woman, he's not allowed to say how beautiful she is. The Gemara gives the example of an akeva, of a woman, because it's more common. It's more so, but it's the same thing regarding any guy as well. So what Rav says is the same point that it says here in the Braisa. Meisvei, the Gemara asks from what it says in the Braisa the following incidents. Maise, but Rav Shimon Gamliel, Shahoya al Gabi Maila Bahara Bayis. Rav Shimon Gamliel was standing in a high place in the Hara Bayis, and he saw a beautiful woman, a guy. And Omar, and he when he saw her, he said, Marabu Masach Hashem. How beautiful, how great are the actions of the things that Hashem created. So he did. She found grace in his eyes, and he said, Marab Masach Hashem. So the question is, how can he say this if you're not allowed to give any chain to a guy?
Rabbi Akiva also gave a
Va'af Rabbi Akiva as well. Ra Eishes Tornisrufus Harasha. So he saw the wife of Tornisrufus Harasha, which was the Roman Caesar. And what happened when he saw her? Rok. He spit at her. Sochak. Then he laughed. Ubacha. And he cried. So the Braisa explained why. Because he said that she comes from a tipus rucha, from what's the translation in English? A putrid drop? Yeah, okay. So that's why in other words, he said this in order that he shouldn't be drawn after her. So he reminded himself, similar to what Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that the person, that she comes from a tipus rucha, and therefore he shouldn't be drawn after her. And then Sachak, but after that he laughed. Why? Because he knew that she will become a Giyaitis, and the Nasav he's going to marry her. So he laughed. But then Bacha, he cried, the Hai Shufra Bali, that this beautiful woman is Bali Afra, will then die and be swallowed or be buried in the ground. So therefore he cried. This story about Rabbi Akiva that met the wife of Tornisrufus Harasha is brought in the Rishonim in a Gemara and a Darim, where there the story is brought that Rabbi Akiva used to always have debates with Tornisrufus Harasha, and he always won the debate, and he couldn't handle it. So he wanted to. So the Tornisrufus Harasha wanted to do something that Rabbi Akiva should sin, and he should have chas v'shalom a downfall. So what did he do? He told his wife to go to meet Rabbi Akiva and to try to seduce him into doing an Avoda with her. So this is when he met her. He met her, and Rabbi Akiva spit at her, and Rabbi Akiva wasn't drawn to her at all. And then she spoke to Rabbi Akiva, and she asked him, well, why did you spit? Why did you laugh? Why did you cry? So over there in the Rishonim it says, he only explained to her why he spit and why he cried. He said he spit because you're a tipus rucha, and he cried because you're going to be buried in the ground. He didn't tell her about this that he laughed. He didn't tell her. But after she saw how strong Rabbi Akiva is, and he wasn't drawn to her, so he asked Rabbi Akiva, could I do tshuva for what I did, that I tried to draw you into an Avoda? And Rabbi Akiva said, yes, you could do tshuva. And then she became a Giyaitis. And she ended up marrying him, like it says over here, and that was the reason why he laughed. Okay, this is the story of Rabbi Akiva. But the question that the Gemara is focusing on is from Rav Shimon Gamliel. Because by Rav Shimon Gamliel, it says that he saw a Goyish woman, and he said, Marab Masach Hashem, but you're not allowed to show any chain for a guy. So the Gemara explains, V'rav, there's one more story over here, the Gemara brings, V'rav, second, Aiduyahu de Kamaida. So Rav, this is the answer of the Gemara, huh? Yeah, this is the answer of the Gemara. The Gemara is explaining that in the case of Rav, when he was saying that a person is not allowed to say how beautiful a Goyish woman is, Aiduyahu de Kamaidu. That if a person is coming to praise Hashem for creating such a beautiful guy, so then it's not a problem. Because the master said, when a person sees beautiful creations, what he says is, Baruch Shekacha Bara Ba'ilave. How beautiful is this that Hashem created in the world? So therefore over here, when Rav said that a person is not allowed to say how beautiful is this woman, that's if he's showing this Goyish woman that how beautiful she is in his eyes, and they're accepting this compliment. But in the case of Rav Shimon Gamliel, though, he didn't compliment this woman. He said, "Marav Masach Hashem." So that's allowed. That's not you're not showing any grace to the guy. Okay, but the Gemara now has another question: is it even allowed to gaze at a woman? And so over here it says that Rav Shimon Gamliel was standing on Har HaBayis and he saw this beautiful woman. So how is he allowed to look at her? So Meisvei, the shaila on this is, it says in the pasuk, "V'nishmarto mikol davara." should be careful from any evil thing, which means a person shouldn't look at a beautiful woman. And that it refers even to a single girl. And the Eishes Ish, when it comes to looking at an Eishes Ish, even if she's not beautiful, a person should not chas v'shalom look at an Eishes Ish that could lead him to do an Aveda. That's the Mishmarta, that a person has to have safeguards, to have a Shmira, that it shouldn't bring him to do an Aveda. And furthermore, the Brisa says, "V'loy bebigdei tzeva shel isha," not even to look at the beautiful clothing of a woman that could remind him and bring him, that when he'll remember this, it'll bring him to have illicit thoughts regarding this woman. And another point, what the Gemara will soon say, we'll see. Furthermore, another point, "V'loy b'chamayr, v'loy b'chamayra, v'loy b'chazir, v'loy b'chazira, v'loy b'oifis," and to not look at these animals, whether donkeys or swine or birds, b'zman sheniskakin zelazeh, when they're mating with one another, which could also bring a person illicit thoughts. And v'afila here, the Brisa adds, v'afila maloi einayim kamalach hamavis. Even if a person has a taiva with such a strong desire to have, that has eyes like a malach hamavis, that has eyes that he wants to look, but nevertheless the person should strengthen himself and not look at these things that will bring in negative thoughts. Now here the Brisa adds another thing. It brought up the malach hamavis. Amru olav al malach hamavis. Why is it mentioning over here the eyes of the malach hamavis? It was said about the malach hamavis shekulei molei einayim, that he's full of eyes. And then b'shas pitirasa shel chayla, when an ill person is on his deathbed and he's about to die, Oymid ma'al mirashaysav, the Malach HaMavis comes above his head, v'charba yishlufa biyodai, and he has a sword, an outstretched sword, and v'tipa shel mara tluya bay, there's a drop of mara, of bile, or of poison that's on this sword, and kivin shachayla roya isai, as soon as the person that's ill opens his eyes and he sees the Malach HaMavis mizdazeya, he gets all shaken up, and pesach his piv, his mouth opens up, and this poison of the Malach HaMavis, he throws it into his mouth, and mimena meis. It's from this that the person dies, and mimena masriach. And this is why there's a bad odor from the body of the person that dies that comes from this tippa, this typical mara that is in the person's mouth from the Malach HaMavis, and mimena panav mirikais. And that's why his face changes colors, it becomes green. Okay, that's a side point that this Brisa mentioned. But what's the question of the Gemara? That it says here in this Brisa that a person, that one should not look at a woman, a single woman, a Eishes Ish, even more so. So how could it be that Rav Shimon Gamliel looked at this woman? So the Gemara answers, Keren Zavis Havoy, that this was at a corner. When a person's coming in a corner and he meets a woman and he doesn't have any intention to look at her, so then this is Rav Shimon Gamliel saw this woman and he immediately praised the Eibishter, but he didn't look at her intentionally.
What about the story where he was on the Mile of Har Bayis?
But it's also it was in a Mile of Har Bayis, but it was still at an area where he encountered her without any intention. Okay, now getting back to the point that it said in the Brisa, "V'loy bebigdei tzeva shel isha," that a person should not look at the beautiful clothing of a woman. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, afile shtuchen al gabi kaisel. Even if the woman is not wearing these clothing, even if it's just hanging on a wall, you shouldn't look at these clothing as well, which could remind him of this woman that wears these clothing. Right, so it says in Rishonim that this refers to unique, beautiful clothing. It doesn't refer to stam women's clothing that are not beautiful and unique, that will remind you about a specific woman. There's more details about this, as the Gemara will explain here. Rav Papa says this, that Shmuel said even if this woman is not wearing this clothing, that one should not look at it. That's only if he knows who the woman is that's wearing these clothing. Just to look at woman's clothing that he doesn't know who it belongs to at all, that's not the Isser. The Isser is when he knows who's the owner of these clothing. Rava says about this, Deikanami, I'll prove this to you, because the Tani, the Lashon of the Brisa is V'loi bebigdei tzeva isha, or the Lashon of here is Shel Isha, that don't look at these beautiful clothing of this woman. V'loi katani v'loi bebigdei tzevainim. It doesn't say don't look at these beautiful clothing. It says of the Isha. Shema Mina. So that proves that it's only if the person is looking at these clothing, even if she's not wearing them, but he knows who's the owner of these clothing. Amar Rav Chizda adds another detail. Hanemili ba'atiki. But this is only by clothing that are old, meaning that she already wore them once, and he already saw her wearing this clothing. So now, when he sees the same clothing, even when she's not wearing it, it reminds him of this woman. So that's when it says that he shouldn't look at this clothing. Aval b'chadati, but if it's new clothing that she never wore yet, even if he knows who the owner of this new clothing is, but he never saw her dressed in this new clothing, then les lamba. Then the Issa does not apply. And he brings a eye to this because the if you're not going to make this distinction, anan mana la ashpuri heichi yavinan. A woman that has clothing to amend, to come and to give it to a tailor to fix her garments, how could she ever give it to this person to fix it for her? Hakamistakel. He's taking these garments from her, and he's doing the work for her, and he's looking at the garments. How can he do this work for her? So Elamai, it must be that the reason is because this is new clothing that he never saw her dressed in it, and therefore he's allowed to do the amends. So, but the Gemara says no, that's not. This is not a proof. From this case of the tailor that's doing work with a woman's clothing is not a raya to make this distinction between new clothing and old clothing, because all the time, hey, if you're following your reasoning, this that Rav Yehuda said that min b'minay mutar lahachnes k'mekchol b'shveiferes, that even though it mentioned before in the Braise that a person should not look at animals when they're mating, but yet a person that has his own animals, that he takes care of them, he's allowed himself to bring them together, to mate them together. He wants them to have babies for his parnasa. He's allowed to do it with his own physical hands. So the question is, how is he allowed to do this? He's looking at something which is forbidden. So Ella, what's the answer? Ba'avidite taught it. He's not doing this with any illicit thoughts, with any taiva. He's doing this, he's busy with his work in his farm, with his animals. So Hachanami, if so, the same svara applies also regarding a tailor. Ba'avidite taught it. He's doing the work, he's doing the amends for the woman's garments. So whether it's new garments, whether it's old garments, whether he saw this woman wearing these clothing, it's not something where there's any reason for an issa. This Gemara, Avidite Tarid, is also the source in halacha that Paiskim say regarding a doctor, a male doctor, to treat a female. If it's Avidite Tarid, he's doing his work as a medical professional. There's no Aved, there's no Isser B'Dover at all. Okay, but this distinction the Gemara has said before between Atiki and Chadati, it seems like from the Gemara that it's not accepted b'Payal. Okay, Omamar, going back to a point that was mentioned before in the Braise, that mimena meis, that when a person dies, it's from the malach hamaves that drops the mara, bile or poison into the person's mouth. So the Gemara name in Pligadav Avoda Shmuel. Shall we say what it says in this Braisa? Argues on a point that the father of Shmuel said. The father of Shmuel said, Amali malach hamaves. The malach hamaves told me, Eloi de chayshina liyakara de briasa. If not for this, that I was concerned for the honor of the people, of human beings, when they die, have a parana beis hashchita kibehema. So then when the Malach HaMavis says, when I would kill a person, I would kill him in a way that his throat would be slit, it would be slaughtered like when an animal is killed. So what you see here from what the father Shmuel said is that the Malach HaMavis, when he kills a person, it's like slitting the throat. It's not with this mara, with this poison that he drops into his mouth. But the Gemara says it's not a contradiction. Dilma hahi tippa, this drop of poison that goes into the mouth of the person, mechatcha lohu l'simonim. It's so powerful that it actually cuts the simonim of the person. And if not for the fact that he wants that the person should die in an honorable death, it would be clearly seen externally the way it is when an animal is slaughtered. And then the Braisa said, mimena masriach, and that it's from this that the bad odor comes from the person. This proves the point that Reb Chanina bar Kahana said, it was said by Rav, if he wants that the mace should not cause a bad odor, he can turn him upside down, because when he's laying up and his mouth is open, that's from where the poison that was placed into his mouth, that's where the bad odor comes from. But if he's placed upside down, so then you won't have that bad smell. Tana Rabbanon, and another brayso we learned about this pasuk, v'nishmarta mikol dovera, that a person should be careful and stay away from evil. It means shelo yaharer adam bayoyim, a person shouldn't have illicit thoughts by day, v'yavoy lidei tumah balayla, and this will cause him to come to impurity at night. In that pasuk, right after the pasuk v'nishmarta mikol dovera, it goes on to say, this is actually a pasuk where it speaks about a person that's going out to fight in war. What does it say after v'nishmarta mikol dovera? That a person shouldn't become a balkeri at night. So which means that if a person has illicit thoughts by day, this causes him to become a balkeri. Now, if you look here at the top Taisus of the Yamid, Taisus says that this drasha that the Gemara is saying over here, Shaloya Harer, is not stam a drasha of an agadeter, but this is a drasha gemura, and it's a isra min atayra. That's what it says here in Taisus. Now, it's this pasuk that speaks about a person being careful, not to have a thought that could lead to an aveda or could lead to tumah. So it's from here that Pinchas ben Yair said that Taira mivia l'dei zehirus, when a person learns Taira, so then it brings him to be careful to not to do things, or like we see over here, the shmarta, to be careful not to do something that will lead him to have a tumah, to do an aveda. That's the first step, zehirus. And then zehirus mivia l'dei zrizus, when a person is careful. So this brings him to zrizus. Rashi actually says here that the zrizus is the vinishmarta. The vinishmarta is when a person has zrizus, that he's very quick and careful not to do something that will bring him to be nichshal in an aveda. So it's more than just zehirus. It's with a bigger enthusiasm to make sure to stay away from something that can lead to an aveda. And then zrizus mivia lidei nekiyus, a person that has this zrizus, that is careful to stay far away from an aveda. This brings a person to be very clean. So clean, Rashi says, is that he's noki without any aveda at all. Nekiyus mivia lidei prishus. Nekiyus brings a person to be completely separate. Even, Rashi says, prishus means even of something which is permitted. Well, when a person does something for a taiva, so then after a person is clean from an aveda, it brings him even more to prishus of things that are mutter, that he could be machmer on himself. And even more so, prishus mivia lidei tara. This brings a person to tara. Rashi says tara means that he's tzach melubin. It's even more than just being clean, where he's completely beautiful, pristine. That's tara. And tara mivia lidei chassidus. That's the gersa that we have here in this brayse. There's different gersas here in the seder of the brayse, but the gersa we have here in the Gemara, that then tara brings a person to chassidus, piety, and chassidus mivia lidei anove. Chassidus brings a person to humility. And anove mivia lidei yiras chet. Anove brings a person to have fear of sin. And yiras chet mivia lidei kedusha. And then it brings a person to holiness. And kedusha mivia lidei ruach hakodesh. And ruach hakodesh mivia lidei tchias hamesim. And then ruach hakodesh brings a person to tchias hamesim. Okay, so now the Gemara says on the seder of what it says here in this brayse, as I mentioned, there's different gears exactly in the order of what it says here in this brayse, that v'chsidis gedayla mikulan. To be a chassid, that's greater of all of them. Shenem, because the pasuk says, "Oz di barta b'chazayin l'chasidecha." The Eibush speaks in a vision to his chassidim. It doesn't say l'reyecha, doesn't say la'anavecha, but it says chasidecha. So therefore, chassidus is on the highest level. So which means l'chayre that according to what the Gemara is saying here, the order of the brayse has to be different. That chassidus comes later, after anova, after yiras chet. The taich of yiras chet that it says here in the brayse, yiras chet comes after anova. As it says in Chassidus, the taich of yiras chet means that a person is afraid of the chet itself. The word chet means meloshen chesaron, that this chet will separate me from Hashem. He's not afraid of himself, of any consequence that he'll have from the Aveda, but he's afraid of what the chet itself does, that it severs his connection to the Eibusha. That's the yiras chet. Okay, but Chassidus is a much higher thing. When the Gemara here says that Chassidus is on the highest level, it doesn't teach here in the Gemara, not in Rashi either, what the inyan of Chassidus is. There's a discussion in Mefarshim about this, what exactly the Gemara means when it says that Chassidus is on the highest level, but we know what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. Ezeu Chassid, am is Chassid im Kainai, in kan delay, when a person does his Avedis Hashem purely for the Eibishter's sake, not even l'ravos tzim'oinai, he's not doing it in any way, even for the thirst of his own neshama, that he wants to be connected. He's doing it purely for the sake of the Eibusher. That's the Emes of Chassidus, and according to this version of the Gemara, that's on the highest level. But the Gemara says now, with this, that it was said that Chassidus is on the highest level, O Pliga de Rabbi Shua ben Levi. That argues on the point that Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Anove gedayla mikulam. Humility is greater than all, even higher than Chassidus. Shenema, because the pasuk says, Ruach Hashem Alekim Alai, Yan Moshach Hashem Oisi, Levaser Anovim. The Eibush speaks to, and he says to the ones that are humble. Chsidim loy namar. It doesn't say chsidim, ela anovim. It says anovim. Holamadato sha'anovim gedayla mikulam. Anove, humility, which means a person that has absolute bittul to Hashem, that's even higher than chsidim. Okay, so exactly what the discussion is, whether Chassidim are higher or Anavim is higher, interesting discussion, but this is this famous statement of Rav Pinchas ben Yair, which is also brought in the end of the Gemara in Saita. Yeah. Okay, one more piece here. Huh? Yeah, but over here, if the Gemara says that Anava is higher than all, it must be speaking about a very high level of Anava. It's not speaking about a person that's not a Balgaiva, and then the Eibishter can't be with him. It has to be speaking about a very high level of Anava and Bittul, where it's higher than everything. Okay, the Mishnah said, Ein moichrin lahem v'chulu. So in the Mishnah there was a machlekes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. If you're selling a tree that's still attached to the ground, but with the condition that the guy will cut it when he buys it, is that allowed? So the Tanakama said that it's not allowed, but Rabbi Yehuda says that if it's al-manas, that he's going to cut it, then it's allowed. So here the Gemara brings a brayse that spells out more details for this machlekes. So Tana Rabbanon, we learned in the brayse, moichrin lahem ilon al-manas loketz. You could sell the guy a tree with the condition that he's going to cut it, and the kite sits, and then he cuts it. David Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. However, Rabbi Meir says, Ei moichrin lahem, you can't sell it with the condition that he will cut it. El kitzutza, it has to be cut from before, and then you could sell it to the guy. Another example, shachas almanas ligzais. If you're selling a guy shachas, now shachas is when the wheat grows. So if you let it ripen completely, so then it'll be wheat that will be used for human consumption. But if it still grows like a third, so it's used for animal feed. So you could sell a guy this property that has shachas, and you sell it with the condition that he's going to cut it for animal feed, and the guy will cut it. David Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says, you could only sell it if it's already cut. A third example, kama almanas liktzar. You're selling a guy the wheat once it's already ripe and it's ready to be cut, and you sell it to him. Almanas that'll cut it, and the guy cuts it. David Rabbi Yehuda. That's allowed. Rav Meir says, Ein moichrin ela kitzura. You only can sell it to a guy if it's already cut. So these are three different examples for the same machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. So the Gemara explains it was necessary to say the three cases here. Why? Because the Yashminan Elon, if it would only say the case where you're selling a guy a tree with the condition that'll cut the tree, I would say Baha Ka'amar Rab Meir. It's here that Rab Meir says that the guy must cut it before you sell it to him. Because Kivin Delay Pasid, since if he's not going to cut the tree is not going to get ruined in any way. So therefore, Mashile. So even after you sell it to him, he's not going to come and cut it immediately. So therefore, Rab Meir says you have to have the guy cut the tree before. Aval hai, but when it comes though to wheat that's already ripe, the chimashila, when you leave it attached to the ground, when it's ripe and it's supposed to be cut, pasid. So then the quality of the wheat, of the kernels, will get ruined. So aimim maydilei, I would say over here that Rab Meir would agree. He's maydil Rabbi Yehuda that you don't have to cut it before you sell it to him, because you can rely on the fact that the guy will cut it right away, because if he won't, it's going to get ruined. Now, there's a third case that was mentioned here. V'yashmina bahani tarti, if I would say these two cases, I would say mishum deloy yadia shevchayu, because regarding these two cases, when you leave it attached to the ground, you don't see, it's not noticeable that there's anything that's gained in what's remaining attached to the ground here. Regarding the wheat, the longer you leave it attached, it actually gets ruined. Even regarding a tree, even if it doesn't it doesn't get ruined if you leave it attached, but you don't see clearly by a tree that if you leave it attached that it's going to grow more and get better, not necessarily. So therefore, in such a case, you have to have the guy cut it off before. Aval shachas, the idea shevchayu, but when you're talking about the shachas, what's the shachas? This is the grain which is only a third ripe. So over here, if you're going to sell it to the guy, and the guy is going to buy it, he's going to want to then leave it and grow fully. And you could clearly see the benefit of it growing fully and becoming totally ripe. So Rab Meir, over here Rabbi Yehuda would agree to Rab Meir that you have to have it cut off from before. So therefore, has to say the third case as well, that even in this case, Rabbi Yehuda says that he relies on the guy cutting it off right away. And the same thing Gemara says in the reverse, V'yashmina Baha. If I were to say only this case, I would say Baha Ka'amar Rab Meir, that it's only regarding this case of the shachas, where Rab Meir says that the guy must cut it off before, because otherwise the guy will want to keep it, because you can clearly see what it gains when it's attached to the ground. When the other two cases, I would say that he agrees to Rabbi Yehuda that we can rely on the guy cutting it, and therefore tzricha, we must have all these three cases. One more thing the Gemara now asks, based on what we learned here, the Shaila was asked, Beheme almanas lishchait. You're selling an animal to a guy, which is what we had earlier in the Gemara, that you're not allowed to sell large animals to a guy, because he might work with it on Shabbos. As the Gemara explained before, the reasons for this. But the question is, what's if you're selling the guy the animal and you're making a clear condition with him that he's going to shecht it? He's not going to keep the animal in his possession. So mahu, what's the halacha? Is it allowed in such a case? The question is, could I compare it to what Rabbi Yehuda says over here, that if it's al manas, that it's going to be caught, that then it's allowed? So what's the question? So what would I say? Hasam time in my shari, Rabbi Yehuda, the la b'reshus kaime. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda says that if you sell a guy a tree in your property, and you're making a condition with him that he's going to cut it, that it's allowed, the reason is because the tree is in your property. So if you're selling it to the guy and you made a condition with him that he's going to cut it, you're going to make sure that the guy is going to cut it. He's not going to be able to leave the tree in your property after you sold it to him. That's the deal you made with him, and you'll make sure that the guy cuts it right away. But if you're selling a guy an animal and you're making a condition with him that he's going to shecht it right away. But once you sell that animal to the guy has the animal in his property. So mashila. So now you don't have control over him. Not necessarily will the guy shecht it right away. So maybe here Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you can't sell it to him even if you make this condition. Or maybe this svara does not matter, and the same svara of Rabbi Yehuda that applies here applies by the behema as well. So the Gemara brings a raya from a brayse where it clearly says that the same svara applies by the animal. Tashama, the brayse says, the Tanya, behema amanas lishchait. V'shaychit, that you can sell an animal to a guy, a large animal to a guy, with the condition that he'll shecht it, and the guy, we can rely on him, that he'll shecht it right away. Divrei Rav Yehuda, that's what Rav Yehuda says, just like he says it here regarding selling him a tree, that we rely on him cutting it right away. Rav Meir argues just like he argues here. Rav Meir argues by the animal as well. You could only sell a guy an animal that is already shechted. You can't sell him a large animal.